Throughout a big part of my life, I've been interested in playing Zelda games. It's been a huge part of this channel as well. However, with the more recent game, a lot of things changed. The series isn't really the same anymore. And today, I will explain why. Now, the ideas of The Legend of Zelda have never been set in stone. Just look at the very first game, which was extremely open world and top-down, while the second one was a more limited and side-scroller adventure. And if you look at the game that came after, it was completely different once again. However, there's one game in the series that had a huge impact on the games that came after. In some ways positive, and in others negative. The one that I'm talking about is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, released in 1998 on the Nintendo 64. The game stands as a fan favorite, currently holding an average reader score of 9.7 at IGN. Years after its release, Ocarina of Time continues to be a popular game, frequently being featured on compiled lists of all-time best games. For some players, the game's high success had overshadowed the potential success of later Zelda games, therefore becoming a tough act to follow and marking in a certain way the downfall of the series. So, as you could expect with a game as successful as Ocarina of Time, it left a permanent mark on the series, because it introduced many design elements that would be repeated in later games. It was the first game where we saw a detailed design of Link, Zelda and Ganondorf, and set the standard for their overall appearance. It featured a ton of classic races like the Kokiri, Gorons, Hylians, Gerudo, and a whole lot more, and these were seen in almost all the games that came after. Even when it comes to mechanics and overall game design, Ocarina of Time created the formula for all that followed. While it's not the first game in the series to feature a musical instrument or a list of songs, it is the first game to allow the player to play songs note by note, rather than simply selecting the item or the song being used. It also introduced the targeting system, eliminating difficulty for camera control, and also helping to focus visually on very distant spots, enemies or characters. It set the main lines for the timeline, which we all follow by now. It added a companion called Navi that tried to help you throughout the game and guide you to the next objective. And a bunch of styling and animations that would be seen in all the following games, like the chest opening mini cutscene. Besides these overall features, it also created the layout and format for almost every dungeon in the entire series. Clearly, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time had an insane impact on the series, and created a specific formula for all that followed. All these things I mentioned were seen in other games. However, when Nintendo released Skyward Sword for the Wii, things kind of changed. The old ways didn't really work anymore. All the 3D and some of the 2D games followed in its footsteps. For example, Majora's Mask to an extent, Twilight Princess, the Minish Cap, and at the very end, Skyward Sword. There were some differences and new mechanics here and there, but the main sections and the overall structure were based on the one Ocarina of Time had. But after such a long time, it didn't work anymore, and Skyward Sword was heavily criticized and didn't do so well in terms of sales. So they had to change the format, and so they did. This transformation ended up becoming the critically acclaimed The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This game changed everything, and most likely forever. It introduced a number of completely new mechanics and ditched some others. Like the rune abilities, which allowed Link to manipulate the terrain and opened the door to physics-based puzzles. A revolutionary change that gave Nintendo a ton of new options and played a huge role in two new things in the game: the shrines and divine beasts. These were essentially puzzle boxes, and as the name implies, they're small or big areas filled with puzzles that are connected to each other in some way. Other good examples of this concept are the Water Temple and Great Bay Temple from the N64 Zelda games. But this isn't all, because Breath of the Wild also introduced a ton of freedom, which we never really saw in Ocarina of Time. It features a vast open world for you to explore. Most of Hyrule's scenery is accessible by walking, paragliding, or climbing. And if you encounter a problem, you can always solve it, for example, by using a different weapon, which is possible now as well, or cooking food that gives you added bonuses. The possibilities are endless, which is a great thing. Now, as you can clearly see, this game got rid of the old formula completely or heavily heavily modified them. The Ocarina of Time influences are almost completely gone. Even the companions aren't a thing anymore, luckily enough, because most of them were pretty annoying. Except Midna, she at least had some character. However, now we get to the big question, the big kahuna. With this era in the franchise coming to an end and Ocarina of Time fading away in history, what will happen next? The franchise is evolving and actually changing for the very first time in years, because all the previous ones didn't even put a dent in the classic formula. The only one that came close was A Link Between Worlds with its open dungeon aspect. So what will happen in the next Zelda game? Well, we actually got some information about that, because it's already in development. Because Nintendo producer Aonuma recently confirmed that a new Zelda game is in production. Game director Hayadumur, something Japanese name that I can't pronounce, also told IGN the following. I can't say at this point if it will be in sequels or continuations or what form it will take, but I definitely have lots of ideas and lots of motivation right now. Aonuma also gave a firm answer about how the team wants to deal with Zelda games in the future. You know, I can't speak to what other people, other companies will do in their own games. But I think for me, especially just in terms of the Zelda series, the incredible freedom that this game offers you and how well that has been received. To me, that level of freedom is something that needs to be maintained in Zelda games going forward. My eyes have been opened to how important that is. Clearly, this game had a huge impact on the lead developers as well. They went from a more narrow and linear mindset to something extremely broad. However, now that they got rid of the old formula and started experimenting again, which elements of Breath of the Wild will stick? Well, like I mentioned before, the open world stays, which is certainly a good feature because options are always great. In terms of setting, it's probably somewhere after Breath of the Wild. However, Nintendo tends to do whatever. I mean, just look at the timeline. And when it comes to the art style, it'll still have the cartoony, cel-shaded look, but will probably just be more refined and detailed. One point to note is that the last game was developed with the Wii U in mind, which may have held back the visuals somewhat. And I'm 100% sure that there will be no Wii U version for the next Zelda game, so it will look a lot better for sure. But what about the shrines, divine beasts, cooking, rune abilities, and a whole lot more? What will happen to those mechanics? Well, this is where it gets tricky, because it depends on what the main gimmick of the game is. And because of the fact that the open world aspect returns in the next game, I would say the Sheikah slate is not gonna return. I would put that ability under the same list as transforming into a wolf from Twilight Princess and merging into walls from A Link Between Worlds. It's a ton of fun and really cool, but doesn't appear in every game, only once. And you need to keep in mind that the physics engine of this game took ages to create, so if they start from scratch again, it's not very likely to return. Now the other ones will probably be seen in the next one in some way, shape or form, because they're extremely important for the open world aspect. The shrines are like mini dungeons and challenges and are quite crucial for filling up the world with stuff to do. The cooking is a mechanic which also helps with this because otherwise there wouldn't be enough loot, and the same goes for the breakable weapons, which also play a crucial part in keeping the game balanced. Because without them, you could just go to Hyrule Castle, get the strongest stuff in the game, and use it to destroy everything. I'm quite sure that these three mechanics will return in some way. Maybe a different take on it, or an updated and expanded upon version. So in some way, these might become the new Zelda tropes and formula. It all depends on how creative the development team remains. When it comes to the dungeons, the freedom will remain for sure. They even used the similar mechanic in A Link Between Worlds. Now, if they will remain to be the open puzzle boxes that we call the Divine Beasts, it's tricky to answer. A lot of people didn't really like them, which I can understand. So maybe they will go back to a more linear room-to-room dungeon style. Something similar to what we have seen in almost every Zelda game, even the ones before Ocarina of Time. Now, what kind of settings and types of dungeons may we encounter? Well, I have no idea. Nintendo tends to do whatever they like. So now that this Ocarina of Time influenced era of the Zelda franchise has ended, we're back in the unknown. There is no set way of doing things. As far as we know, only some things from Breath of the Wild will be seen in the next one. But one thing is sure, the Legend of Zelda franchise has changed forever because of this new game. Let's all just wait and see what Nintendo has in store for us. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to watch more videos, click the annotations on the screen right now. And then subscribe, of course, and click the bell. I have a little cold. Sorry if my voice wasn't that good. I'm a bit sicky. Not in the terms of like whack and sick and all that rap shit. It's just I'm a bit sick. Sorry.